Assalamu alaikum, welcome to another podcast and welcome Dr. Atilla again.
Hello, Dr. Zuleyha. Hi, it's good to be here again.
Yes, we want to continue a conversation about qadar or free will more specifically. It's a very big topic and we've been looking at it from different angles, which has been very beneficial, I think, for our audience. But today in particular, talking about, do we really have free will? The reason why I say that is in some of the comments, some of our listeners have mentioned and cited some Quranic verses, and I've actually got two here, so I want to read them.
Okay.
And let me know what you think. So in Surah Al-Kahf 18:29, it says, "And say, the truth is from your Lord, so whoever wills, let him believe, and whoever wills, let him disbelieve." And then in another one, Surah Al-An'am 6:125, it says, "Whomever Allah wills to guide, He opens his heart to Islam, and whomever He wills to misguide, He makes his heart tight and constricted." So I guess these are just one example of each, but there's, you can find a group that look at one as though we do have free will and another one that as though we don't. How do we reconcile these?
They are actually interesting verses in the Qur'an, and they seem to be apparently contradicting, but not in reality. They don't contradict. In fact, there's even another verse which scholars have debated on a lot, and it is, I think it's in Surah Safat, as I remember. It says, "Wallahu khalaqakum wa ma ta'malun." It is He who creates you and your actions. So it goes into a deeper thing there, because if our actions are also created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then, do we really have a free will? And the free will debate, really, it goes all the way back to Hellenistic era. If we look at the old Greek scholars, philosophers, I should say, they debated on this thousands of years ago. And people like, Zeno of Citium, we have Stoicism, Epicurus and other Greek philosophers have talked about it. And some had this ideology that there is some sort of divine determinism. Others thought of, causal determinism. There's
cause and effect.
Cause and effect, which is causal determinism, they call it. And some of them accepted free will, but in a limited way. And then it was debated in Christian theology as well. And some of the important figures are like Augustine of Hippo. He was a very famous theologian, but he was a little more lenient towards determinism as well. Thomas Aquinas had written quite a bit about free will as well.
So when you say determinism, that's where you have minimal free will? Is that what you mean?
Minimal to none when you think about it. And now all of these ideologies or arguments that we have in free will and determinism, it's sort of reflected on general philosophy as well in the West. And we see the emergence of three major schools in the West.
Right, okay.
One school is called, it's debated, and one school is called libertarianism, which is, it gives absolute freedom to, human free will, freedom of choice. And then you have the incompatibilist school. And they believe in determinism, whether it's a causal determinism, and some part of this school also believes in divine determinism as well. And you have the compatibilist school.
In the middle, I'm guessing.
They're in the middle, and they say that, free will and determinism could coexist. When we say determinism, we're not talking about absolute determinism, but we are saying, predestination, maybe it's a better term.
Right.
People do use the term determinism. However, when we look at Islamic theology, we see a similar pattern.
I was thinking that, yeah.
There's three major schools there as well. Historically, one of them is the Jabriya or Jahmiya, it's called, because Jahim bin Safwan is the one who established that school. And according to them, it's absolute determinism. Destiny, but we have no free will at all. In fact, he believes that our free will is just an illusion. We think we have a free will, and they argue that if you dropped an object from your hand, there's only one direction it could go. It's downwards because of gravity, of course. And they say human life is like that too. You know, it's already determined. There's nothing you can do to change it. All the efforts you make is just an illusion. You're deceiving yourself. And that's Jabriya. You know that that's not the mainstream school, of course. You know, Ahl Sunnat wal Jamaat.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
I had someone once tell me about this Jabriya and with the compelling arguments. And I would say for about an hour or so, I got into that mode of thinking as the Jabriya, just to see it was like, and it was paralyzing. Like I felt like, you can't, you have no control. And that in itself becomes like, makes life purposeless because you don't have any choices, you don't have any
no
will.
Control at all.
It's
scary.
It's scary,
it's
very
scary.
Unhealthy as well.
Yes, it is psychologically unhealthy too.
Unhealthy, yeah.
And the other, the opposite pole, we have of course, the Mu'tazila view, or the Qadariya also they are called. The earlier version is Qadariya. And as you know, they believe that we have absolute free will, just like libertarianists. And they don't accept the view, the major mainstream's view, Ahl Sunnat wal Jamaat view, that human beings, even our actions are created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They believe that we create our own actions. In their own mind, you know, they justify this with Tawheed. They say that, you know, because human beings also perform bad deeds, evil as well. If we assign it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that would violate Allah's, you know, the justice, you know, and similar things. So their argument was based on that. However, if you look at it from a Ahl Sunnat wal Jamaat perspective, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can create, originate. You know, He has the sifats like takween, the originator. So only He can bring something into existence.
And Khalik, the creator.
Khalik, the creator, and Qudra, His Qudra, His will, you know, all of these things, irada, like will, and these are all contradicting, you know, if we say humans can create their actions. Moreover, Bediüzzaman Said Nursi, he says that if we were creating our own actions, every action we do would be perfect.
If we were creating our own actions?
There would be no problems with it because it would be just as the way we planned it.
Right.
But that doesn't always work. Sometimes we plan certain things in a certain way, but we can't put it into action in that way. Because there is something there that beyond our decision. So, but the balance there is important. You know, do we really have a free will? Of course we have a free will because the Qur'an says we have a free will, as you mentioned before, do as you will. In fact, I think Qur'an is one of the only scriptures, divine scriptures, that actually mentions free will. I did not come across it in other scriptures. Qur'an is very clear, says do as you will, you know, but also mentions the consequences as well there, of course. So we do have a free will, but from an Islamic theological perspective, it's very limited. You know, some even say it's nothing but an inclination. And two major schools in Ahl Sunnat wal Jamaat, which is the Maturidi school and the Ashari school, has, you know, some semantical differences between their views, because Asharis believe that even free will has some sort of a substance, an entity. They believe that it needs to be created as well.
Right.
So they limited free will much further, human free will. And they actually said even free will is created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is something like Allah presents many different pathways, possibilities in front of us. We sort of incline towards one of them.
Is that the Keskin concept? Or no? That's something
it's yes, it is similar to Kesp, but the difference between Maturidis, because Maturidis accept Kesp as well, acquisition, but Asharis believe that our free will is very, very limited. So they never focused on free will too much, and that is what I say when I analyze the views of Asharis. They are more sort of inclined towards Jabriya a bit. And when you look at the Maturidi views, they are more inclined towards the Mu'tazila.
Right.
Because they give human beings free will, much more freedom. And Maturidis say because free will is only nominal. Its existence is theoretical. It is not a substance. It's not made up of some substance. So it doesn't require creation, they say.
Okay, so they don't give it as much weighting or like give it an entity as the Ashari do. So that's how.
They regard it as not a material thing.
Oh.
And so they say it does not need to be created. It is something that Allah gave to human beings, and we have the option of using it. So their view is a little bit more inclining towards the Mu'tazila as well. But they're both Ahl Sunnat wal Jamaat schools, which is the majority of Ahl Sunnat wal Jamaat anyway, 90% of it. There is that 10% there, which is Salafism and other views as well.
They both accept free will. They also obviously accept God's will, but it's on the spectrum, it sounds like.
Yes. But Bediüzzaman Said Nursi brings a really amazing explanation to this, how they can coexist. He says God's free will is külli irade, which is absolute will, and human free will is cüzi irade, or irade-i cüziye, minor will. And he says they are connected with a basic condition where humans make the intention and God creates the action. It's a very nice equation when you think about it, because then it solves this issue, that those two verses which seems to contradict, in reality they don't. Because humans make the intention, they make the acquisition. Acquisition, which we call kasb, is actually means, it's like a petition to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to create an action. Because in reality, when you think about it from a biological perspective too, it is impossible for us to even lift our hands. It's very
biologically.
Simple. Yeah, biologically. Because when you think about all the actions that occur during, lifting of the hand, there are many things happening in our bodies. And we are not really in charge, in control of that process. So there is something else there. There's some other power there controlling it all. Which makes sense to me, because we are, in a way, when you think about the Western, understanding of free will and determinism, we are in the middle, just like the compatibilist view. But Islamic theology is more comprehensive when you look at it. It looks at all the very little details as well, so they don't violate the Tawheed, oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and give him that creative power, while they also assign human beings an ability to make choices. So it satisfies both, the verses there. Yes, Allah, gives us hidayah. He is Hadi, one of his names. He guides us, but he guides us based on our request. It is not a compulsive thing, He doesn't guide us by compulsion.
No, based on a request, our efforts,
there should be inclination there. That's what I mean.
Again, goes back to inclination.
Yeah, there should be some sort of inclination. You knock on the door and Allah opens the door for you. So you need to make that effort. You don't just sit and wait for Him to guide you. So it works together.
And this is powerful, and it's a very important mindset, isn't it? Because it's, as you said, it helps to avoid that violating of Tawheed, because you can't say, I became a believer, let's say, because I did all the right things. Yes, even saying that, it sounds so wrong, doesn't it? Because you're taking Allah out of the formula.
Yeah,
but at the same time, you don't say, I'm a believer because Allah made me. It wasn't that I wanted to. That sounds really odd as well.
That's compulsionism, just like Jabriya, and some people mistakenly fall into that category, although they are following the Ahl Sunnat wal Jamaat. But the way they speak, they sound like Jabri, because they say, if it's written for you to do this, then you have to do it. It's enforced upon you. It is not like that, really, in reality, because Allah doesn't, for example, say to Abu Jahl, you will be Abu Jahl, you will be a disbeliever and you will die as a disbeliever. And then to Abu Bakr, you will be loyal, you will be Siddiq and you will go to Jannah. That is compulsionism. Then there is favoritism as well.
And it's not just.
It's not just. Allah is adli mutlaq. Allah gives them both the same, chance, same opportunities. They make their own decisions there. Allah, knowing which decisions they're going to make, does not compel them to do that, act. So that's where the people have a problem understanding. That is why, like, if you look at Fiqh al-Akbar of Imam Abu Hanifa, he explains this amazingly. I really love the way he puts it, the equation there. He says, for example, in the qadar of Abu Jahl, it is not written that Abu Jahl will die as a disbeliever. That will be compulsionism. So what is written there? He says, what is written is causality altogether, the cause and the effect. So in his qadar, it's written that Abu Jahl, with his own free will decide to be a disbeliever and therefore will die as a disbeliever. So it's not enforced upon Abu Jahl. He is the one who's making the decision. That is why Mu'tazila usually fell into the fallacy of only looking at the cause.
Okay,
and
so they got too fixated on the cause.
Too fixated, yeah, like you said, on the cause. And Jabriya only focused on the effect, the result. Yeah. They never thought about the cause. But Ahl Sunnat wal Jamaat looks at both cause and effect. Like that example Bediüzzaman Said Nursi gives. If someone holds a gun to someone else's head and pulls the trigger and the person dies, if he did not pull the trigger, would the person still die? He says, if you say yes, he would die, you're Jabriya. He says, if you say no, he won't die, you're Mu'tazila. He says that the correct answer is we don't know. Because anything can happen. Allah knows the ghaib. So perhaps the person doesn't pull the trigger, the person dies out of from heart attack or something, or doesn't die. We don't know. We don't know because we can't look into al-Lawh al-Mahfuz to say this is exactly the scenario is going to happen. So we take causality into thing as well, and Allah creates causality as well. We call it asbab. So that's a very important thing. We've got to accept that there's causality there, but behind the curtain of causality, it's qudra. We are seeing causality in front of the veil. Behind the veil, it's qudra. But in regards to irada, free will, I want to talk about very briefly one very important research about neuroscience, how the brain works. And it makes things more complicated in reality, but I think it's a good area to study. There is an experiment called the Libet Experiment. Benjamin Libet, a person called, as I remember in the 80s he did this experiment. And he established that when human beings make a decision, with their brains, the first thing that occurs is neurons in the brain begins to fire. That is the first thing, initial thing. And then between the firing of the neuron cells and the muscle movement of the act, there's 550 milliseconds. So the brain fires, neurons fire, and then the muscle movement occurs. There's 500 milliseconds between them. But between the two, there's another thing that occurs, which is about 220 milliseconds after the initial firing of the neurons, which is the consciousness becomes aware of what's happening.
Okay, of the decision that was made?
Yeah. So if you evaluate things from that experiment, it seems like there is absolute determinism there, a causal determinism. And the decision is made by the firing of the neuron cells. But Libet also includes this argument. He says that although initial, firing of the neurons provides the process or starts the process, but consciousness, has the ability to veto the decision or, do the action. That's very interesting too. And usually in philosophy, this is called dualism. Dualism is, body and mind, or matter and metaphysics. So what they're saying is matter is represented by the brain. Brain makes certain, chemical reactions to produce action. And the other one is beyond matter. It's called the mind or soul. We can call it the soul there as well. But I think dualism, from my perspective, still doesn't explain the whole thing. And I usually add a third component there. And if anyone wants to use this, please cite me.
Okay, what is it?
Because dualism is very famous,
it's very well known, yes.
Because they have body and mind. And it's this. Neuron cells fire, or neurons, I should say, in the brain fire. And then consciousness gets involved. It accepts the decision or not, let us say. And then after that, action occurs, muscle movement occurs. But the process, the explanation of the process is not complete.
What's missing?
Because from a causal perspective, causality perspective, what causes the firing of the neurons at the beginning? There has to be a cause there. Something has to cause the neurons to fire.
Is it the thought process, decision making?
It's unknown. It's unknown. But if you look at the materialistic view, people only who try to interpret everything through matter, material process or physical process, they say that it is a chemical reaction that causes it. Yeah, but what causes the chemical reaction? It's still, from a causality perspective, some sort of a commandment is given to the brain to start firing.
That's right. Something's initiating that.
Initiating. So from my perspective, I line it up in this way, the process, I list it as, initially it's the soul, the ruh that gives the command to the neurons. They start firing to produce a decision, and then consciousness comes in, and consciousness for me, it's like the intellect or cognitive, skills. That comes in and it evaluates it and makes a decision, and then the action comes in. So
you think the soul initiates
the whole thing. So that allows free will there. See, that allows free will to occur there.
It does. Yeah. Wow. Okay. There's so many questions I can ask about that. I mean, the soul initiates, but when you say the soul, do you mean the ruh, or is it along with the nafs working together?
It's the ruh. Maybe nafs is involves when consciousness gets into the thing, into the picture, we should say. Because nafs works more with like impulses, it is connected to the animalistic side of human beings. It's like an interface maybe, in a computer. So nafs, that's when nafs gets involved, and then your intelligence, your consciousness, wijdan we call, and the nafs maybe has a thing there, a bit of a quarrel, and then the decision is produced. But initial, process is, for me, is commenced by the soul.
The soul. Is it always a good commencement, or it could be either way?
That's a very important question too, because they could be, because the term carnal soul or the pure soul might come into the picture there as well. But I think the pure soul, which Allah created, it is fitrah.
Fitrah, yes.
So it probably, always, wants to do something good, something positive. And then it's evaluated by the carnal soul, the nerves, consciousness, and intellect. They all get involved there.
That's true, because it's based on the hadith, where humans are born upon the fitrah, which is a good nature, innate nature. So it always wants to do good. So in a way, I guess you're saying that the soul is keeps sending good messages, but it could be blocked.
It could be blocked, vetoed. Just like Libet says, it could be vetoed.
And then that causes inner turmoil, because blockage it's not a positive experience, and that's why that unsettlement can happen in a person. Whereas if there's good message, and the conscience is aligned, the nafs is aligned, you just see this flow of information, positive.
It's very complex. And the human brain, the human itself is a very complex being.
Yeah.
So, but when you look at it from this perspective, then we understand the process somewhat. We understand
it.
it.
Understand, yeah.
And we understand that in reality, although we are part of the decision-making process there, and then we realize at the end the creation of that action or permission for you to do that, to an action, if you have istita, of course, which is ability, it all belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ultimately, He allows you to do an action. I think that is why Quran also says, you cannot will unless He wills.
So Allah's will can veto, override our will any moment.
He has the overall veto.
Overall veto.
So He can allow it to be created, He creates it anyway, or He can stop you. Because we can't do everything that we decide, can we?
We can't, yeah.
But most of the time, 99% of the time, Allah allow us to do it because we are going through a test in this world and free will is needed. Without free will, there won't be accountability.
Exactly. Yeah.
Allah cannot force you to do something and then on the day of judgment say, why did you do this? I'm sending you to punishment. It's not justice. It will not make sense. Yeah.
It's fascinating. It does get more and more nuanced and detailed, but I think at the end of the day, we just remember we do have free will based, like as we were explaining, and the fact that it's saying, if Allah wills, it doesn't mean He is negating our will. Allah's will is the kulli irada. But it doesn't take away from our will.
Exactly.
And therefore we're responsible and accountable for our actions and deeds.
Exactly. And from qadar perspective, another thing that people usually have struggle understanding, we do things or we make decisions not because they are written in al-Lawh al-Mahfuz. Because we decide to do those things, that's why it's written in the al-Lawh al-Mahfuz. So it's the other way around. Because Allah is beyond time and space. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is no such a thing as future. Only for us, future exists. For us, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they all exist simultaneously at the same time.
He's beyond time.
So He knows we are making that decision. That's why it's recorded in al-Lawh al-Mahfuz. So it means that knowledge does not cancel out the obvious. Which we could say. In reality, knowledge depends on the actual, but the actual does not really depend on knowledge. Maybe that's a good approach to understand it.
Let's repeat that. So knowledge does not depend on...
Knowledge depends on
the actual. The actual doesn't depend on the knowledge.
Yes.
So as if we're going to do something, we're choosing to do it, and that's why it's in the Lawh al-Mahfuz.
That's why it's already there.
But you can't say, I did this because it was in my qadar, like as in suggesting as though that's kind of the Jabri approach.
Yes. Maybe one last analogy before we...
Analogies are powerful.
Analogies are good. Like, for example, if I wanted to know what time I need to pray Asr prayer tomorrow, for example, I do open the app, and app gives me the exact time. Let us say 3:45, all right? With the minutes, the app gives me the exact time. Now, why? Because astronomers have figured that out, how the sun sets and all of these things when the shadow is that much, and they put it there. What they have written there is knowledge. But tomorrow, when the sun comes to that stage, that is the obvious. That is the actual. So that knowledge depends on that actual. But that actual does not depend on that knowledge. Because if I change that to 3:47, it's not going to change the actual. The actual is already going to be assigned the way... it's all measured.
So the knowledge it's based on how good that knowledge is. And here we're talking about Allah's knowledge being infinite.
Infinite, so it's accurate.
It's absolute accuracy.
It cannot have mistakes. It's all encompassing knowledge. But Allah's knowledge does not enforce or compel us to do something. That is why Abu Hanifa says, Qadar is not commandments of Allah. Qadar is descriptions of Allah. So it is information. It is not enforcement. It is not a compulsionist view. When we look at qadar, so it's based on what we would do or what we would choose to do. It is not the other way around, where it makes the decision and we have to follow that. But this is to do with human, free will.
Yeah.
Not cosmological thing.
Yeah, we're talking about human
anything
free
beyond our capability is already determined anyway.
will. Yeah.
Because universe is a deterministic place, except for quantum world. That is a bit confusing there, but
Yes.
generally it is a deterministic place. Everything is works with precision, measurement, physical laws. Yeah.
Yeah, there's no randomness in that.
Yes.
But we have free will. That's really good. Thanks for sharing that. I guess it really helps us to reconcile these verses when we truly understand human will and free will, God's will, and how they actually play out together. And having one doesn't mean the other's negated. They actually can work. They do work together.
Yes.
So thank you for sharing that. And I know for some of you this might sound quite complex. My suggestion would be maybe listen to it a few times. I would really recommend that. But also, when you're talking about free will, I think just looking at it, like listening to different talks. We've done a few of these before as well. Listening to a few from different angles can help to sort of help to accumulate knowledge to better appreciate it, because it's not always that easy.
There could be further questions too popping up.
That's
they can
right.
feel free to write there.
Exactly. Yeah. Feel free to put in the comments any specific questions you have about free will or qadar, because I personally would love for us to do more and looking at specific angles to it, because it's like building blocks. The more you look at it from different angles, you see a multi-dimensional understanding. You get a multi-dimensional understanding of qadar.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. So thank you for watching, and see you next time. Assalamu alaikum.